Found guilty. He was found guilty.
Here we begin WFA News at 5 with breaking news. In the trap meet stabbing trial, a jury found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder for killing Austin Metcalf last spring. Metcalf and Anthony were both 17 years old at the time, and Anthony is 19 now. The trial immediately entered the punishment phase, and jurors just heard arguments from both defense and prosecutors as they weigh Anthony's sentence. We have live team coverage of the verdict and sentencing from the Collin County Courthouse. Senior crime and justice reporter Rebecca Lopez, senior investigative reporter Tanya Iser, and Cole Sullivan are all there to bring us up to speed. We're going to start with Rebecca and Tanya.
Well, Chris, this jury began deliberating about 11 o'clock, and then just before 2 o'clock, less than 2 hours, they had a verdict, and they did find Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder. They also could have deliberated the lesser charge of manslaughter, but once they found him guilty of murder, manslaughter was off the table. He faces 5 to 99. But Jobin Puneker has been inside the courtroom, and he heard the closing arguments. He heard the testimony from Karmelo Anthony's mom, which is the only witness that was called to testify in this punishment phase. Jobin, tell us what the courtroom was like, first of all.
You know, we always remember when it's really loud in a courtroom where people are talking about things, and you also remember when people aren't saying a thing. And the quietest moment that I ever experienced, at least in this trial, is the moment before the jury walks in to deliver that verdict. And then the next thing we hear, after the verdict is read, Kayla Hayes, this is Karmelo's mom, audibly crying. And it's loud. She's the only one making noise in that moment. Her grandmother, Karmelo's grandmother, is also crying right next to her. Obviously a very difficult moment. And one moment that I do want to speak to is there's a moment when Karmelo Anthony is now remanded into the direction of the sheriff's department, and he is walked out with a deputy and his 2 attorneys. In that moment, Karmelo Anthony walks out. He's crying visibly. He takes a glance over at his parents. It was a split second, and it tells you so much about the pain that happens with these verdicts and the sentence.
But talk also a little bit about Austin Metcalf's family, because Hunter was in the courtroom for the first time. He has not been at this trial. Their reaction.
Yeah, there was very little emotion during the verdict and after the verdict. It wasn't until they came in for when the jury first got to hear about the actual sentencing charges. That's when they were actually the most talkative. But before that, they were very quiet. There was a time during closing when Bill Werski's talking about life sentences have already been handed out in this case. Megan Metcalf has a life sentence. Jeff Metcalf has a life sentence. And Hunter Metcalf already has a life sentence, talking about the loss of Austin Metcalf. And that's when we see Megan Metcalf really having a moment there. It's very difficult.
What do you make of that when it comes to the jury going to have to deliberate this and decide his punishment?
Well, I think that they take what they hear, and I think for what Jobin said and Werski's final argument to them, I mean, I think it's relatively recent to when they go back and deliberate. So I think it's going to really have some people thinking about things. And yes, you have to determine how you want to punish this defendant. But what Werski was doing is saying you can't forget about this family that's been affected by these actions.
Chris, back to you.
I want to just follow up on some of the things you said, in terms of how this played out with the jury being able to consider manslaughter and murder. Was this something that was expected and quite so soon?
Tanya?
I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, he asked if manslaughter and murder were something that was being expected that this jury was going to deliberate.
Well, I would have been surprised if they had not included manslaughter. I would expect in a case that it would have been included. But Rebecca, you and I were talking about it earlier. Keith and I were talking about when this verdict came back so quickly, you just knew that manslaughter was taken off the table, that they were going with murder, that the verdict was going to be murder. I think now the biggest question is how long will it take them to deliberate on punishment? and how much of a factor will his age, his youth, and how much will they take into account that body cam that shows his remorse in all this? I think, a lot of that remains to be seen as to how they will view that.
Yeah, Chris, very decisive on this jury. They made their decision very quickly.
And I'm just wondering, from your expertise, from Jobin being in that courtroom at the time, will they look at the same evidence that they used to reach a verdict of guilty? Can they look at that with different eyes or with a different perspective when it comes to actually deciding how long he should be in prison?
Keith, they're asking if they'll use the same evidentiary information that they had to convict Karmelo Anthony into their decision on his sentence.
I think so. I mean, I definitely think that that's something that they're going to do. And what you kind of have to realize when they're listening to that evidence and guilt innocence at the beginning, they're not talking to each other about, hey, what are your thoughts and what are your thoughts? Because they can't deliberate until all the evidence has been submitted and they can deliberate. And so now that evidence might look differently because now you've got 12 other people, or if you're one, you've got 11 other people that are in agreement with you. And so now you might look at that saying, hey, we all have agreed that this is murder. And now what do we do with what we've seen? And so I definitely think that they're going to look at it again. How they weigh that out, people can look at it differently. Some can find some empathy in some forms or some sympathy or something like that. Some could find some aggravating things in some of the original conduct. So it's just going to depend on what they discuss and how they deal with it individually as well.
And we've all seen cases where the mere fact that they find somebody guilty of murder doesn't mean that the sentence is going to be life. I mean, we have seen cases, we've all covered them, where we think, oh wow, they found them guilty of murder, they're going to give them this lengthy sentence. And sometimes they come back and the jury does show mercy. His mother getting on the stand and asking for mercy. It remains to be seen how much impact that will have on this jury.
And both sides in their closings today said, we want you to deliver something that is fair and meaningful. And maybe you can fair and meaningful is a very, very broad range.
Well, we talked about that earlier, and I think that that's one thing that we were looking to see what Bill would say in punishment. Would he ask for a number or a sentence? And he didn't, because they're leaving it to the jury to decide. I think the one thing that Bill did do is said, hey, don't just forget about this life sentence, because there's this family that has gotten life sentences. So yeah, y'all are going to decide, but I want you to still consider the full range without telling them, oh, give him a certain time period, because you don't want to lose credibility with the jury if they've convicted him and they're somewhere at a way different number than what you would give to them.
And Chris, this judge has said that this jury can deliberate as long as they need. He has said that we could be here until 10 o'clock, however long it takes them today to reach this verdict. If they do not, then they would be sequestered, Chris.
All right, great context and insight. I know you guys are going to be right outside the courthouse there as we wait to hear from the jury again. I want to get now to Cole Sullivan. He's been getting a sense of how the crowd is reacting to this verdict. Cole, what are you hearing right now?
Chris, hearing Jobin describe the tension inside that courtroom, it is equally or was equally tense outside the courtroom. And if it was quiet inside that courtroom waiting for that verdict, it was loud out here. The crowd has shrunk considerably since the height of it when that verdict was read. We'll take you up above from our helicopter now so you can kind of see that crowd. And about a dozen people out here, a lot of media, but a busy parking lot with a lot of cars out here. At its height, we probably had 150, maybe as many as 200 people out here. And as I said, it was loud. Here's some video from earlier. You could see the crowd, you could see people yelling and shouting. I did not see any physical contact at any point in this. No one put their hands on each other, but there were definitely some forceful disagreements. All of it happening under the watchful eyes of Collin County Sheriff's deputies. Interestingly, there were a lot of influencers, a lot of streamers, people with their phones out recording and broadcasting what was going on out into the world. Other folks were just here to watch. Some people brought their kids here to witness what they called a historic moment, and one woman who did that said she didn't like how it went.
It made me sick to my stomach. I'm sick. I just feel like there was so much that wasn't taken into consideration. It was so fast. I'm not even sure about a proper jury of his peers. It just felt rushed. to get an answer quickly, and I feel like there should have been a lot more time and consideration taken into things.
Let's talk about security. There's been a lot of it out here. For this whole trial today, a noticeable increase with deputies standing guard in front of the stairs to this courthouse. Right now, there are still people out here with people waiting in their cars. It's very, very hot outside, but you can tell that people are still here. The parking lot is full. There are people with signs saying justice for Karmelo or it was self-defense. But for as many people we've seen who have been in the Anthony camp, we've also seen folks here from the Metcalf side as well. Now all waiting to see how the sentencing will go. Chris.
Yeah, very much so, with the jury having to consider an extremely wide range of years. Cole, thank you very much. Just want to let you know, as soon as the jury made its decision, our team went live on air, as well as our streaming app, WFAA+. We saw emotions running high outside the Collin County Courthouse. You can watch the moment that verdict came down on our free streaming app, downloaded to your TV right now.